Last time we spoke about the turning points of World War II, the battles. This time I want to talk about what it was like to live the civilians' experience of World War II. World War II involved the concept of total war, in which opponents try not to just defeat each other's armies on a battlefield, but destroy the other country's ability to wage war at all. This includes attacking or undermining an opponent's economy, industry, manpower reserves, and morale. In total war, an entire society mobilizes, not just the military. The following slides will examine elements of total war in World War II. A country's effectiveness in engaging in total war depended on its ability to fully mobilize all sectors of its economy. So in the US, instead of making cars, they stopped and they started making tanks. That's what that would look like. Whatever you make, you're only going to be making stuff for the war now. Often this involved putting production under the control of a central government bureau to help industries shift from consumer production to war production. At the outset of World War II, British Prime Minister Winston Churchill embarked his country on a massive program of war mobilization. Britain's success in increasing war production and making it more effective to efficient helped catch up to Germany, who had been rearming for years before the start of the war. In the United States, the Office of War Mobilization not only supervised the country's production, but also offered financial incentives to encourage manufacturers to meet certain benchmarks. Civilians on the home front contributed to the war too. Remember, total war means everybody's doing their part, not just the businesses. So civilians on the home front contributed by giving up many of the conveniences and goods that had been used to getting an ultimate. It wasn't just businesses that contributed to the war and total war. All the civilians have to contribute too. Civilians on the home front contributed to the war effort by giving up many of the conveniences and goods that they had been used to getting an unlimited supply, like butter, sugar, milk. Governments instituted systems of rationing, placing limits on the amount of gasoline, coffee, meat, sugar, and other goods one could purchase. Government issued ration books full of tear-out coupons determined how much a particular good each citizen would receive. As the war went on and shortages increased, many people found they had to wait in lines for hours to receive their government-allotted portion of rationed items. Many eased the pain of rationing by growing their own fruits or vegetables in their backyard. These little gardens in your backyard would have been called victory gardens. Others carpooled or rode bicycles in order to reduce gasoline use. Many donated metal to scrap drivers, and even more bought war bonds. Children would buy war stamps to support the government financially. Governments encouraged all these efforts by issuing colorful posters that reminded people of the importance of their activities. Propaganda. While rationing may have made life inconvenient for many, it did give many on the home front a sense of purpose and kept morale up by helping people feel that they were making valuable contributions to the war effort. As men went off to fight in the war, women filled their jobs in a number of industries. Many worked in factories that manufactured war materials, including planes, ships, guns, tanks, and other vehicles. In the U.S. alone, nearly 5 million women entered the workforce because of World War II. Nations during World War II realized the important role that morale played in the war effort. Governments worked to control the spread of information and used different types of propaganda to raise their own citizens' morale and to damage the morale of enemy countries. Although propaganda often sought to encourage nationalism, Both sides also attempted to dehumanize and create hatred against the enemy, as evidenced by the poster on the right side of this slide. Propaganda most often appeared in the form of leaflets and posters, but also appeared in short films or radio broadcasts. One of the most famous radio propagandists of World War II was Tokyo Rose, a Japanese-American expatriate named Eva Toguri, whose broadcasts attempted to undermine the morale of U.S. soldiers in the Pacific. After the war, she was taken into custody by U.S. troops and became just the 7th person to be convicted of treason in America. The demands of total war led to shifts in military tactics. Rather than just targeting opposing armies, factories, military bases, armies in World War II increasingly began to go after civilian targets in order to undermine the morale, decrease the enemy's labor force, and deplete enemy resources. One of the first instances of attacking civilians and non-military buildings came with the Battle of Britain, the firebombing of Dresden, and the atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki carried the targeting of civilians to new and frightening levels. This chart reflects civilian deaths in World War II. Air raids and bombings over densely populated cities account for some of the large numbers. Air raids against Germany claimed the lives of over 300,000 and injured an additional 780,000 people. Civilians. Holocaust is a word of Greek origin meaning sacrifice by fire. Genocide was an element of the Holocaust, but the Holocaust involved much more than genocide. According to the U.S. Holocaust Memorial Museum, right here in Dearborn, the Holocaust was the systematic, bureaucratic, state-sponsored persecution and murder of approximately 6 million Jews by the Nazi regime and its collaborators. The Nazis, who came to power in Germany in 1933, believed that Germans were racially superior and that Jews were deemed inferior, were life unworthy of life. You see the pictures of how they would starve the Jewish people, put them together in these inhumane places to sleep, and execute them. The victorious allies, France, Great Britain, Soviet Union, and the United States, agreed to establish an international tribunal to try Germany's leaders for complicity in the deaths of 12 million people during the war, including the 6 million Jews. In October 1945, the International Military Tribunal met in Nuremberg, it's in Germany, where its prosecutors indicted 22 principal Nazi leaders on crimes against peace, war crimes, and crimes against humanity. Other lesser cases would be handled in national courts. 12 defendants received death sentences, 3 defendants received life in prison, 4 received sentences of up to 20 years, and 3 were acquitted. There was also a big tribunal for the Japanese, too, an even larger one than the Nazis had, longer and much more extensive. But part of the victory with the Japanese, since they surrendered, was that the emperor would be spared the trial. So it was less satisfying than the Nazi trials were, because those who actually started this war were punished in the Nuremberg trials, while in the Japanese trials, they weren't involved. These are the questions for today's discussion.